Hello and welcome to another episode of Athletics for Life. This is a show where we're your hosts, Jeff and CD, and we like to talk about the lessons learned through sports. We interview athletic directors, former athletes, coaches, interesting people in the world of sports, just to talk about how the lessons that they learned in sports have helped them throughout their life. And so today we have a really interesting guest. We're really excited to sit down with her. Jeff, would you mind introducing today's guest?
Yes, I would love to do that. So we are in season 2 of our podcast. We're traveling through Asia, and our next stop is in Chang Mai in Thailand. Wish we could go there to eat something, but we're not. So we're very happy that we have Laura Davies on the podcast today. Laura is from the UK. She works at Lanna International School. And I've been following her a little bit on LinkedIn. She's been doing some panel discussions with School Rubric on the LGTBQ plus community, and also to support women coaches, women in sports. We are very happy that we have a female AD on the podcast today, City. That's great. So we are very excited to talk to Laura today, to see how she's doing, what the school is at, how the school is at, where she works, and just learn about her programs and about her philosophy. So I hope you're all excited for the podcast today.
Yeah, let's go to Chang Mai. Yeah, so why don't we just jump right in? Tell us a little bit about where you're from, your background, kind of where you're at now in the world, and we'll kick it off.
Awesome. Sorry, that's just my dog's barking in the background. So I am from the UK originally, just outside of London. My teaching career started in the UK. I was teaching physical education, and after a few years, heard about international schools and international teaching. So started to look around, and now I'm in Thailand. So I'm teaching physical education, and I'm the athletics director in Chang Mai, which is in the north of Thailand. I've been here for 6 years now. Really enjoy it. Really enjoyed the international experience, and that's kind of my background, really.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's interesting, CD. The last few podcasts seem that we have people from the UK every time. That's great. That's great. Their background is a little bit different. How do you get into the AD role? Can you talk a little bit? How do you got involved in the athletic director kind of role?
Yeah, sure. No, it's interesting. I think it is quite different from the UK perspective. Certainly when I was working in UK schools and I was teaching PE, school sport isn't kind of as big there. You very much, if you're going to pursue a competitive pathway, you do like club sport, and that's all run outside of schools. So it's a lot more kind of recreational school sport. So really it was quite eye-opening to come to the international arena and see how big these international school competitions and conferences are. And obviously, once I began working in physical education departments and coaching teams, you realize it's as much a part of the job as just teaching. And then eventually when the opportunity arose to be the athletics director, I felt I'd had enough experience kind of coaching and being a part of that, that I was ready to get involved. But yeah, it was definitely a bit of a change from what I'd been used to, and just managing, the scale of international competitions. Yeah, for sure.
So each international school is a little bit different, right? Some are quite large, some are relatively small. Kind of what's your program like? How many sports do you have? How many teams do you have operating at one time? What do you oversee?
Sure. So we, our school is kind of, I suppose I'd say like medium sized. It's grown a lot in the time that I've been there. I think when I arrived, it was 300-400 students, and now that's doubled, and with plans to, keep expanding. So in terms of the model, we have a local athletics conference called CMAC, which is Chang Mai Athletics Conference. I think we have about 10 schools within that, a mixture of American, British, European, and so on. So we have a 3-season model. In our season, our main sports, I think we have, depending on the age group, like football and basketball, swimming, season 2, football and basketball would flip the age groups, and cross country and track and field. And then our final season is volleyball and badminton. And for the younger ones, we do some futsal as well. So a mixture of team sports and individual sports. Obviously, COVID's impacted on that the last couple of years, but yeah, when everything's running, we have everything from U12 up to varsity team levels in boys and girls sports.
Cool. And how you said you do are you like head of PE and the athletics director, or can you talk a little bit about your specific role there?
Sure, yeah. So I am a secondary, like high school PE teacher. I'm the head of physical education and the AD. So that's always interesting when I, meet with other ADs who are like, oh, I only do the AD role. And I'm like, oh, that must be amazing. But for me, I really enjoy the teaching aspect of it. And I enjoy, the education side of sports as well. So it's been nice to have that balance of doing the AD, the coaching, and also the physical education side of things. But yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act for sure.
You'd mentioned with your sports that you swap the age groups.
Sure.
How does that work? And was that always the case, or is that something that you changed to?
I believe it's something that was changed, but it changed prior to me being there. So since I've been there, so for example, I'll just kind of explain it in a bit more detail, but for season 1, we would have JV and varsity doing football, and then we'd have U14, U12, U10, U8 doing basketball, and then for season 2 we'd flip it. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. I think it's partly facility space, so you can kind of stagger where different competitions are happening. It also means, for example, for me as a football coach, it means I can coach varsity in season 1, and then I can coach U14 in season 2, and you can have people specialize and follow those teams throughout the school. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning behind that was, but I think it's maybe a combination of factors.
Sure. We had tried to go to something similar a couple of years ago here, but I think our schools were just a little bit too small. And so, the same person is coaching basketball, who's also the volleyball coach, who's also the football coach. And so they can't be coaching everything, all the time. So it just made sense for us to keep them, all together.
Right.
It's interesting.
Laura, can you talk a little bit about the school you're working at now? It's called Lanna International School, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, the school's based in Chang Mai. It's, as I said, it's grown a lot in the time that I've been there. I think when I arrived, it was half the size, and sports were, I guess popular. Students enjoyed them, but we had very few teams, and I guess a bit of a philosophy of students just kind of wanted to rock up and do the competitions. They're like, yeah, we'll come to the games and we'll come to the competitions, but trying to get consistency in training and getting that buy-in where they felt like, oh, I'm part of the team and I have to be there every week and I have to kind of, work on myself and improve for the team. That's definitely been a process that we've had to develop and try to really raise the profile of sport. So yeah, it's been something I'm quite proud of, the fact that the program's expanded and I think become more inclusive, more opportunities for students to do different sports. Being a British international school as well, I think we don't have the same philosophy always as the American schools, where sport's such a huge part of the culture. So again, it's trying to get, staff and parent buy-in as well, and for them to see, this is a huge part of their overall school experience. And can really kind of add value to that. So it's been a process, but I'm a lot happier with where we are now, aside from the COVID closures and things, than when I started, for sure.
So I'm sure we'll get into COVID sooner or later. Really quick though, I'm curious, what are some steps that you've taken to get that buy-in and that consistency? Because that's kind of where we're at now. We're at the before stage of what you've mentioned, trying to get kids to, understand that they need to be at practices, and that if they're not, then you can't really play in the games. So what steps have you taken to build that buy-in and that kind of sense of being on a team?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we tried to do a few different things. So one of the things, like when I first arrived, we had kind of like a school color and a logo, but it was a bit old and dated, and the kits weren't great, and the kids weren't really like proud to put on the jersey and proud to kind of be a part of, you know, the school. So we redesigned the logo, we got a student to design it, we rebranded our kind of sports program, we got our kits all designed with like school colors, and the students got to have a say in how that looked. And you know, insisting that they all wore that, and we turned up and we looked like a team. So I think the branding of it, like once the students were like, oh, actually, like we like those kits and we like that logo, and we're called the Lanna Lions. They're like, we like being the Lions, and you know, it sounds cool. So that was definitely part of it. I think other things we've done. So most of our teams, like our coaches, will do team socials. So we'll do like an end of season dinner, maybe at the start of the season, we'll do like a team building kind of activity. And again, just trying to make them feel a part of something. You know, myself and my partner, we coach the varsity girls team together, and we do things like, you know, after training practice, like email all the players what we thought they did really well at the practice today, you know, what we want them to work on, sent them like YouTube videos and stuff, and just try to get them a bit more inspired to be a part of it and to take it a bit more seriously. And then the final thing we did is we did like an annual sports awards, and those sports awards, for the most part, the students vote for the awards, so they get to choose who, you know, they think the MVP is, who's most improved, who's, you know, bringing the most team spirit. Coaches get to choose an award as well, but we put the voting forms out, and the students are very much a central part of that process. So I think it's not one particular thing, but when you put these things together, it just kind of as a whole lifted the profile of the program, and made students more aware that it's happening. You know.
Talking about the award ceremony, because we had another interview a few weeks ago, and with Sim Cook from Kobe, Japan, and he was talking about having it's all student-led, the whole award ceremony. And now you're talking about students voting for awards. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm trying to, you know, it's always been very, sorry, Steve, but North American here at the international school with, you know, the pins and the letters and all that stuff. And I'm trying to twist it around a little bit and make it a little bit more inclusive, student-led. Can you talk a little bit more about how you organize that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, the first thing we did was to let the students know that the awards would be happening, and what it would involve and what it would entail. And then it was a case of, actually the first year we did it, we would go into every PE class and tell them, you know, this is happening and this is how you're going to vote, and this is, you know, the ways that you can vote. And we did it actually in person, so we'd get them to, you know, fill out a ballot and put it in a box. We've now kind of evolved that to it's a Google form, and that partly because of COVID and not always being in school, but yeah, they get to, for every team they're a part of, they get to fill out, you know, who they think are most deserving of the awards, and we tally all that up. And then we also have like an outstanding contribution award, so someone who has like represented multiple teams, or, you know, been a huge part of a team, like the team captain, or, you know, has done something kind of above and beyond. So yeah, it's really trying to reward, for us mostly, you know, teams outside of the school, when they go to competitions, they'll get their medals for placing, or, you know, however well they do, but this is kind of trying to reward the effort, the commitment, you know, the progression they've made over the course of a year. And students have really enjoyed it. You know, even when we were closed last year, we did a virtual sports awards, and they were really into that, and they still, you know, logged in to watch it, and their parents got to see it. So yeah, it's been really nice.
So we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, and you mentioned virtual awards, the elephant in every room, it seems like. What's COVID been like for you and your school, and how has it impacted your program?
Yeah, it's been up and down really. Like in some ways we've been quite fortunate that at times Thailand has been relatively good at dealing with COVID, and we've been able to stay open maybe more than other schools, but we've had probably on average at least a semester per year for the last 2-3 years of a closure. So I think 2019 to 20 we had the end of the year, it was closed, same again the following year, and this year we started online, we've gone back, and now there's been kind of surging cases again, so we're waiting to see. And obviously every time that happens, sports gets shut down, and then it kind of gradually, gets to go out again, and then you're just waiting, for it to almost like reset again. So it is frustrating. It's frustrating for us and for the students who, particularly for the older students, right? It's a big part of their school kind of journey, and for our varsity teams in particular that haven't, maybe even missed a whole season or not been able to have that for the last couple of years has been, heartbreaking really. But we're just trying to do what we can to keep it going, and as soon as we get the green light, get straight back into it. But yeah, it's been a challenge for sure.
So currently you guys are still faced online, or the kids are back at school?
We are literally, we're in person at the moment. We're waiting this exact weekend. I think we're going to find out tomorrow if we can stay open. And so we are at the moment, for PE and sports, we're allowed to do socially distanced activities. We're doing a lot of racket games and things like that. But team sports are, really, really restricted. So we didn't have season 1. We're about halfway through season 2, and that's looking unlikely as well. So yeah, it's difficult times.
What have been some of your kind of biggest learning experiences with COVID and having to be so flexible? How have you grown because of it?
Yeah, I think, I think the first reaction when it all happened was, just get through it, and hopefully, we'll get back to normal and we'll be able to go back to how we always did it before. I think there's definitely been a shift in the mindset of not just myself, but a lot of the ADs, and other schools as well. And now we're thinking, all right, do we need to change our season model? What events can we host online? So, we did a virtual cross-country event. We've done some virtual kind of skill challenge-based events within schools. So looking at ways that we can sustain something while we're online. But, I'll be honest and say, I don't think we've cracked it yet. We're kind of caught between that. Should we go for a hybrid model? Should we change the structure of our season? We live in hope that maybe we'll get back to normal. So yeah, it's definitely been, I think we've all become more flexible and a lot better at just kind of rolling with it. You can't invest too much in hoping that stuff will happen. And I think the students have got a lot better at that as well. But yeah, I couldn't tell you what the next kind of 6 months will bring really.
So you say you're halfway season 2, so
Right.
because you had no idea what's going in the next few months, right? But what are your hopes and a little bit your ideas of what's going to happen? Do you have an idea, or?
I mean, we're sort of hoping because Thailand is very keen to open up. They're very much reliant on tourism and visitors, and so that is their goal, to get to a point where that can happen. And if that's happening, then you'd assume sports can happen. So the hope is, I guess, if vaccinations continue to get rolled out, that we can hopefully get back. Maybe in 2022 we can have some competitive sports again. I think for now, like most schools are still doing training sessions, but it's very much like fitness and skills based, and everything's socially distanced, which is is something. I think students have been quite happy to have something, and parents as well. But in an ideal world, of course they want to get back to the competition and the big events and the opportunities to mix with other schools. So yeah, it's kind of wait and see at the moment, and yeah, hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, is it a one size fits all kind of policy from the government in Thailand? Because we've talked to different ADs in different countries, and it's different everywhere, which is very interesting to hear. So how does it work in Thailand?
Yeah, Thailand's really interesting as well, because it's broken up into provinces. So they have like color graded each province based on the number of cases, the severity of cases. So for example, in one province you might have one set of rules, and in another it could be quite different. The other thing is that the government will kind of have a general amount of restrictions, and then the Ministry of Education will also add their own. So as an example, just recently, sports clubs like teams, football teams, basketball teams could play competitive matches in the community, but we weren't allowed to do it in school. And so you have, kids being like, but I played at the weekend, why can't I play in school? And yeah, it's so frustrating. You just have to say, I don't make the rules, I just follow them. So yeah, it can be a bit inconsistent, which is frustrating, but we just do what we can.
Yeah, we had similar situation here. I think last year, the emergency council, or one of the bodies that made decisions, said, okay, well, these restrictions are lifted, you can do tournaments. And they had this massive tournament, 300 some people, I think it was. And then the Ministry of Ed said, no tournaments in school, nothing. Like you can't practice. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the inconsistency, isn't it?
Definitely. Well, Laura, you're actually the first female athletic director we've had on the podcast. We've been trying to get more, female guests on our podcast. It seems to be kind of a position that's dominated by men. So what has it been like for you to be a female in the athletic director role? And do you kind of take it on yourself to raise the profile of women in sports at your school?
Yeah, I think it is, as you say, it is quite male dominated still. I've been quite fortunate in my conference that there's always been at least one other female, at a local school, which has been really great. I think it would be great to have, more women in sports and PE departments in general. I think for sure, one of the things I've noticed about my role, and actually my kind of fellow ADs in our conference are very good at pushing girls' sport and trying to treat them equally. But I think sometimes some stuff is so ingrained that they don't really challenge it. So as an example, we had a tournament, I think it was last year maybe, where we had there's like a pool for the boys and a pool for the girls. And the way that it had ended up was that the boys would end up playing loads of games and the girls would end up playing only a few. And it was to do with the numbers, and one was a round robin and one was a group game with knockouts and things. But I was the only one to say, I'm not bringing a team to play 2 games and go home. Like, why have you done that? And it wasn't that they tried to do it on purpose. It was almost that they hadn't thought about it, and they were like, oh yeah, this will be fine for the girls, this fits into the schedule, that's perfect. And yeah, being an AD and a coach of a team that was attending, I was like, well, that's not cool. We need to change that. And again, it was well received, and they changed it around. But it's just interesting that they wouldn't have identified it as an issue if it hadn't, been brought up. So yeah, I think that's, I've been quite fortunate for the most part, but there's definitely times you have to really fight for the girls, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the reasons why you're on the podcast today, because I've been following you a little bit on LinkedIn and some of the interviews or the panels you did on School Rubric. I really found it interesting to read and to listen to, especially also over here in Mongolia. It's still a little bit of a difficult topic. The times that when we have a big basketball tournament here, and I have a very new big gym and a little bit smaller older gym. And always they say, yeah, why do the boys not play in a big gym? And I'll say, well, we have to, equal it out. It's, the girls have to play there too. So those battles I've been fighting for the last few years. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
And it tends just to be the small things, as an example, there's been a few times where I'll be, at a tournament with like a male colleague, and, it'll be my team, but the assumption that parents or referees make is they walk over and they put their hand out to my colleague and they're like, oh, hey, hey coach, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, actually, that's me, like I'm the coach, So I think it's just those perceptions people have of, it's very much, it's going to be the man that's coaching, the man that's in charge. So yeah, it's just, I guess, correcting and kind of advocating for yourself when you get the opportunity. But yeah, definitely, like you say, culturally in some places as well, there's that additional challenge when it comes to girls playing sport and coaching sport as well, that again, it's nice to be a role model for that and to try and get the students to think differently about it as well, so that we can empower them to be more involved in sports.
Yeah, definitely, and especially here in Mongolia too. I'm trying to, help the local Mongolian females who work at the international school to help coaching. So
Right.
we've implemented some PD for them, and but it's still a battle, even for the kids.
Mm.
Do you have some tips and tricks for ADs that how we can get more female coaches involved in sports or
Yeah, I
coaching?
mean, I think this was something that I did write an article for School Rubric about, and we actually surveyed quite a few international schools and were, asking about what did they think the barriers were, and because statistically there are less female coaches, and there's a multiple reasons for that. Often they're perhaps the person who's in charge of childcare in their family, maybe they can't do the late nights after school, but for me the biggest one has always been the confidence of our female staff to take a team, and a lot of them saying, oh, I don't really feel like I'm good enough, or they worry about that pushback from students or parents. So some things we've done, for example, we've had like collaborations with other schools. We've tried to run like PD and training where one person will come and run a session, for example, in football or basketball, particularly for younger teams, because I always say to people who are interested in coaching, for the younger teams, it's so much more important that you care about the students, that you set a really positive environment, that you encourage every single person to get involved. All of that stuff trumps the other stuff, the skills and the drills and the training that can be learned, and we can support you in that as long as you are passionate and you care, and you want everyone to get involved. So again, sometimes it's a case of approaching those people and trying to show them those opportunities and get them involved in training or shadowing another coach, so that later on they feel that they can take part. But yeah, it is a process, and I think the most important thing is to talk with those female staff that you think could be a really good coach and could be a good addition. Find out what they perceive to be their barriers to being involved, and then trying to help work on them collaboratively.
Yeah, it reminds me of a coach I had at the American school. She had, I want to coach something, maybe like a junior varsity or a younger girls team. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're the varsity coach of volleyball and basketball. And, and she did great. She did wonderfully, but
Right.
she was new to international teaching and kind of doubted herself a little bit. And like, yep, here you go. You're in. But she really cared about the kids. And like you said, at the end of the day, not even with just the little ones, even the older ones, like
Right.
if they know that you have their back and you care about them,
Sure.
then they'll listen to you and respond to you and try their best. And you can learn the skills. You can figure out the drills.
Yeah, 100% agree.
We haven't really had much experience with it yet in Mongolia. We've talked about it as athletic directors. We brought it up with our admin, just about LGTBQ community and their involvement in sports.
Sure.
Do you as a school or as a conference have any policies, or what's your stance on it? What have you guys done to make it inclusive to those student athletes?
Sure. So that's a really great question, and we're in the process of kind of addressing this, and hopefully towards the end of that process, it's something I've been trying to get our conference to consider. Essentially, we did have a student come forward from a school who wanted to play for a team, and there was a discussion about which team they should play for based on their gender identity. And at the time, I think there was a lot of hesitancy from the ADs and from the schools, because there's kind of a lack of just knowledge, really, like people didn't know enough about it. So in kind of response to that, one of the things we did was we had some PD, we had some training with an LGBTQ plus consultant for international schools. Her name's Emily Meadows. So she runs training and she actually does one specifically on sports and on participation. So that was really helpful just for all of us, right, just to learn a little bit more about what some of the issues, and kind of think of it from a student-centered approach, because as international schools we are education oriented, right? I don't think we're quite the same as in the States, in America, where those competitive pathways are really, really important for going on to college and so on. And so it was thinking about what are the aims of our conference, is it competition? Is it participation? You know, how do we put the students first in this? And then we had conversations with other schools. So we talked to an AD at a school in Europe, and he showed us an example of a policy his school had. We talked to schools in Bangkok, and they again were really, you know, great at sharing their policies. So we've kind of taken that, and we're in the process of tweaking that and adapting it to fit our conference. But the hope is that we are almost at the stage of having quite a clear policy in place about, you know, how we can make sure that we address concerns if they arise, but also that for the most part we're putting the students' needs first and trying to make sure that we maximize, you know, opportunities for participation for all students. So yeah, it's a process, but it's been really yeah, we've learned a lot, I think, through doing it.
We are a little bit, is it a little bit easier, Laura, to do that in a country like Thailand? And for example, we are a bit more conservative here in Mongolia. Are there any other steps that we could take or different approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question because we, within our conference, we actually have quite a few quite conservative schools. So we have quite a few American schools that are, you know, quite religious and yeah, I would consider as conservative. It's been a case of sort of trying to educate, but I think there's a line where you have to make the decision based on your expertise and the research that you've done, and explain that to parents, right? You know, we'll listen to concerns and we have these things in place to make sure that the conference remains fair and remains safe, but at the same time, you know, just blanket excluding any student who doesn't, you know, identify or who identifies differently isn't the answer. And again, it's been helpful to be able to say, well, look, there are other conferences doing this and this is what they've done and this is why we're, you know, looking at doing the same. Yeah, I think it's a really, really tough one, isn't it? But someone said something to me the other day about, you know, being kind of complicit with a racist or homophobic request is still being racist or homophobic. You can only go so far with those arguments, and you know, you've got to ultimately make a decision that you think is best for your students, you know.
Yeah, I had a few conversations here too, and it's not so much what I think about it, but it's something that is it's here at the school too. We have 1 or 2 students that are in that transition, right. And so it's something that I have to deal with and just find a right way for them. And in the end, we're an inclusive school. We want all our students to learn skills through sports, right? So we have to find a way, and I think that's the key here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you have, you know, for example, in your conference or in your school, you probably have like a school vision or mission statement, you know, and if you have within that, you know, the inclusion of all students and the development of all students is important, you know, referring them back to that, you know, we can't completely like have different, you know, things for different students. You know, we've got to make sure that we center them and we give them the experience that they deserve. So certainly, yeah, referring them back to kind of your school philosophy can be helpful as well.
To continue with that, how do you market your program or share the philosophy with your community? Because you have a very nice philosophy, and also this whole you know, the women in sports and the LGBTQ community. How do you talk to your parents and to your students about your philosophy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, actually. I think with the students, it's been helpful because I teach them as well as being the AD. I think you know, I build quite good relationships with them, and I think they know through being in my classes, my practices, they have a good idea of what's important to me. And certainly from my perspective, you know, I've always played sports growing up, but I've always, as a coach, as an educator, prioritized, you know, bringing everyone in, making sure everyone has an opportunity to take part, trying to progress every single student. And I think they know and they understand that that's my philosophy. In terms of sharing that with parents, you know, I send out, you know, information to parents at the beginning of each season. We invite them, or we have invited them in the past to the sports awards, so that they can, you know, meet us, see us, understand. I think the sports awards was probably the biggest one, because they could then see, you know, what we were doing, why we were doing it, what we were rewarding in our program, which wasn't just the best students or the most winningest teams. It was about every single student that's, you know, made that program what it is. So yeah, I think, again, ideally in a post-COVID world, we would have more contact with parents, and maybe more opportunities for them to come in perhaps at the beginning of a year, and to understand, you know, what it means for their student to be a part of a team at Lanna. And it's something, yeah, I'd certainly like to explore more in the future. But for the most part, you know, our parents, again, we're really fortunate. A lot of them will come to games and be on the sidelines and be cheering on the team. So yeah, I think they just absorb a lot of it just through contact with us, you know, and being around the events.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm finding is having that conversation with parents. I think that's one thing that I kind of dropped the ball on this first season personally. You know, we had some issues with students not coming to practice, kind of circling back to that, right? And not taking it seriously. And then we had to make a decision, because due to COVID, we could only have so many athletes at the tournament. And well, the athletes who have been coming to practice are going to go to the tournament, and then having to have that conversation with students and parents. But yeah, I think just explaining what the students will get out of being on a team. I find that here in Mongolia, and maybe it's similar for you, Jeff, at ISU, is a lot of parents don't necessarily understand how important sports are for their child. You know, it's for some of the kids, it's so important for them. They just want to play. They just want to be on a team. And some parents don't see the value in that. What steps have you taken to kind of increase that parent buy-in, to get the message across to your parents, to get them at your games and actually there cheering? What have you done to get to that point?
Yeah, again, I think a few things. We you know, we have a website, and we've shared, you know, blogs and things before. I think I wrote something around exam time, because we have obviously the end of year examinations, and that's when, like, without fail, you'll get parents being like, they can't come to training, they're too busy studying, you know. And so I really wanted to put across that actually you should be able to do both. You know, you should still be able to make time for your academics and still be able to train. And actually it's a positive thing to not just be, you know, at your desk facing books, you know, all the time. So yeah, I think sometimes sharing information, because sometimes genuinely from a cultural perspective as well, I think they perhaps aren't aware of, you know, exactly why we're pushing for it. You know, they think I'm coming at it from a coach. No, I just want them to be in practice. I want the team to get better. And it's like, no, actually, I see how stressed they are. I see how tired they are. You know, I want them to have a break that's kind of positive, and they get to move their body, and they get to, you know, not think about studying for a while. Sometimes it's been a case of, you know, speaking with parents on an individual level. And I think, again, you know, when I first came to school, I probably didn't do that enough. You know, I probably didn't give parents an opportunity to reach out to me, or to come and speak to me, or to, you know, send emails and have that contact. And actually, the longer I've been there, the more I've realized that you can nip issues in the bud so much faster by just talking to people, you know, having those conversations and understanding where they're coming from, having an opportunity to say where you're coming from. Yeah, it can make a huge difference. So I think sometimes the temptation is like shut it down, or to be, you know, this is my way, this is how I'm doing it. But actually, the more you can get to know the parents and know why they're doing what they're doing, can be really helpful.
Yeah, it all filters back to just talk with each other, right? And just share experiences. And yeah, the more you do that, the better your programs get, actually. The main reason why we actually interview ADs and people all over the world is just to steal their best ideas, actually. So what are some of your tips and tricks for young and upcoming ADs that are just starting the job? One or two tips or tricks?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, definitely, actually, social media has been a huge one, particularly for the AD role, because again, we don't have anything quite like that in the UK. So coming internationally and being given this role and the expectation that comes with the role, it was a little bit intimidating and a little bit isolating. So using Twitter, finding podcasts like this one and really speaking with and learning from people that have done the job, I think is hugely helpful. And it gives you the opportunity to reach out to people that have probably had similar experiences, similar challenges that you might be facing. Again, particularly because I came to a school that the entire department was new. So we didn't have anyone who was already there to be like, how do you normally do this? Or, what have you done when this has gone wrong before? So being able to connect with people online. And I think the international community is great for that. But yeah, it's a big one, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, connect with people, find out what's going on in other schools, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think we all can learn from each other.
I found it very difficult actually to do that. Actually, what do you use most? Twitter. I found LinkedIn very good for a personal, also on a PD level for myself to connect with people like you, for example.
Right.
What do you use mostly? Like, is it Twitter or Facebook, or what do you use?
I probably use Twitter most, but I would say that in the beginning, I felt like, I'm just kind of shouting into emptiness, like no one's really responding with me. I guess there's, algorithms and all sorts of reasons for that. So any kind of platform where you can directly message people and get in touch through that was helpful. I think another one was, when I was able to, was to attend, there's big like PD conferences, whether it's an AD conference, a physical education conference. Once people have seen you and they can put a face to the name, I think if you reach out, they're much more likely to be like, oh yeah, I remember, meeting her at X, Y, and Z, and we had a chat. So I think networking is really important. And, I've seen people use all the platforms really well. There's a lot of Facebook groups now, which are like, international PE teachers or athletic directors. So it's just finding the right community and finding a community where people are responsive and are willing to kind of, give back as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that I want to get better at, is just getting my teams, not even just for me, but kind of raising the profile of our school sports. And I think that'll go a long way for parents here, for us, because
Right.
Mongolia basically runs on Facebook.
Right.
So if we can just keep celebrating, drop something, keep celebrating the successes of our school, that would go a long way to bridging that gap between parents.
Yeah, actually, Facebook in terms of the school teams has been a big one. We had a kind of a director of marketing come in and really increase what we were doing in terms of social media, and Facebook's been a huge one, because I think certainly in Thailand as well, a lot of parents are on there and they love to see, the teams doing well and see their children, what success they've had, see that celebrated. So yeah, again, social media is a big one. I think the more you share with parents what you're doing, the more likely they are to buy into it, because they see the value of it. If you could be doing the most amazing things in the world, but if you're not telling them what you're doing and why, they might, dismiss it or prioritize other things, or, not push their students to get involved. So I think, sharing is key.
Yeah, I think we're going to near the end of the podcast already. We're already talking for 45 minutes, and we don't want to waste too much of your time on this lovely Saturday. But two more questions. What are some of the personal goals? Maybe job-wise, or maybe going to different countries. What are some of your personal goals for the next few years?
Yeah, that's a good one. We're I think my partner and I, we're likely to be moving on certainly from our school at the end of the year, so kind of equal parts scared and excited to take the next step. One of the things I'm actually doing at the moment is I'm doing a PhD in kind of inclusion in international schools. So my main goal is hopefully finishing that in the next year or so, getting through that. And yeah, just looking for new challenges to grow and develop. I think I feel really fortunate to have been able to be at a school where I've really been able to kind of grow and expand things. And it'll be sad, but also nice to see someone else take that forward. So yeah, just kind of waiting to see what's out there and yeah, what comes next really. But yeah, we'll see.
That's exciting. And yeah, doing your PhD, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, I think.
Yeah.
So as I guess if you're moving on, you might be doing a little bit of looking back and reflection. What's one thing that you're proud of that you've accomplished at your time at your school now?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because I was thinking about this question, and it's, you know, do you choose like a particular moment or, you know, something that happened? But for me, I think you know, I really feel that while I've been at the school, I've been able to really just kind of, I guess, give students a really positive experience of school sports, of being a part of a team, of being part of the program. And I think and I hope that, you know, those students, when they look back on it, will think, oh yeah, that was, you know, I absolutely love being part of that team, or oh, remember when we went on this trip to this tournament and it was amazing. But also feeling like they mattered to us as the coaches, they mattered to their teammates, and really felt like they were a part of something. So, you know, I am, you know, assuming this is the case. Maybe if you ask my players, they might not say the same, but that's, you know, what I hope. And if it is the case, then that would certainly be kind of one of the things I'm proudest of, is just for them to, you know, a year from now, 10 years from now, to look back and think, yeah, like that was a really special part of, you know, my schooling life. That's what I'd like. Yeah,
I'm sure they do. I'm sure. Yeah, if I see you talk, you know, I can see the passion and the enthusiasm for your programs, and I'm sure the kids will feel that way. And it's actually, I think the whole COVID changed the kind of mindset of the kids too, and of the ADs a little bit, I hope.
mm-hmm.
We had a tournament last week, and it was not a real tournament, but the kids felt it was a tournament, and they had some kind of normality back. And
Right.
In the end, it's all about the kids, you know, building skills and learning things for life, right? And yeah, I'm sure they will look back at your program and they were happy to be part of that.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, I think CD, we're almost at the end. I think we're at the end. We don't want to. We had everything done, and we want to thank you so much, Laura, for your time. I've already got some ideas that I'm going to steal from you for my own program. So thank you so much for those.
No worries. No, thank you so much for having me on. It's yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation, and you've made me think and reflect on my program as well. So that's been fantastic. But yeah, if you ever want to connect and ask any more questions, please feel free to.
Yeah, definitely. Will do. Thanks a lot, Laura. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
All right. So we just sat down with Laura Davies. She's at an international school in Chang Mai. So we can cross another country off our list. Really, really good interview. I'm glad that we're finally able to get at least one female on the podcast, female athletic director, because it is such a male-dominated position. I feel like there's a lot more men than there are women. And I can remember back in one of our courses with the NIAAA, I just talked about equity and just being mindful of those things. Kind of like Laura mentioned how, you know, they scheduled the tournament and it just so happened that it worked out this way and the girls only got a couple games. But just being mindful of those things and kind of being on the lookout for things at our schools or in our programs that have maybe just always been this way, that might give more opportunities to boys than to girls, and trying to balance the scales a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. It's always, you know, when you have one big basketball tournament, it's always the last game. That's the boys' game. You know, everybody stays for that. But the girls have to have that too. So you have to find ways to make that happen. I really learned more about that when I was doing the NIAAA courses too, and then Title IX. You know, all those kind of rules and stuff, and it's very helpful. Just it makes me more aware of when we make schedules. You know, what do we do and how the boys and girls, different gyms and Yeah, very great, very good interview. I'm very happy that she took the time on her Saturday to be with us. Been following her a little bit on LinkedIn, and she shares a lot of great information on a variety of topics. One of the things that I really appreciated is how she talked about her award ceremony, how she does a little bit different than what I'm used to. So I'm going to steal some of her ideas, especially now when normal, you go for the MVP and the most improved and stuff, but times have changed a little bit. So I'm going to look more at those skills and how we can appreciate those skills. And so, yeah, definitely some great ideas to make some great changes in our own programs.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Like, I'm hoping to do an athletics banquet this year. We didn't get to do one last year, but I haven't quite figured out how I want to structure it yet. So that's a good thing that she brought that up, and that we can get more student involvement in those awards instead of just coach's choice. So definitely gives me something to think about as we're wrapping up this first season of football for us, and how to kind of let coaches know or let the teams know, hey, this is how we want to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciated her because, we want to talk about women in sports, women coaches, and also the LGTBQ plus community and how to support those students, athletes. And it's great to chat with Laura about that, because it is a topic that is coming our way. If you're working at an international school, and it depends a little bit on the country that you're at, Mongolia is a little bit more conservative. So how do you address that? It's great learning from Laura today.
Yeah, I just really like too how she tied it back to the school's mission. Every school's got a mission that talks about being inclusive and education
community
for all. And so when you have a student that maybe challenges that a little bit, you need to make sure that you are a school that's inclusive and education for all. And you do have policies in place that tie back to your mission statement and the goals of your school.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a good chat with Laura, and glad that we had her on.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, the women coaches is something that we have to push, and finding ways to do that. And normally what I've seen in my own experience, that they are very humble, like, oh, I just want to be an assistant, or I just want to do the lower. But we have to find ways to get them involved in all levels, in all kids sports, and PD and communication. And for me, I think it's very important to talk to the male coaches, that we have to help them, to train them, to make them more confident, and that they can take over that team in the future, once they feel confident enough. And that's something that I definitely need to work on and will work on for the next few years. So again, Laura, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Hope we can connect in the future. We wish you all the best for your new role next year. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, and thanks everybody else who's either listening or watching. Like and subscribe, and we will catch you next time somewhere else. See ya.